Deez Nuts, roll up, got it. Keep looking for you. Deez Nuts, roll up, got it. Keep looking for you. Deez Nuts, roll up, got it. Don't stop me, 'cause I don't care. Don't stop me, 'cause I don't care. Don't stop me, 'cause I don't care. Don't stop me, 'cause I beat that sexy girl. You sexy girl, you sexy girl, 'cause I don't care. You sexy girl, you sexy girl, you sexy girl, 'cause I don't.
Hello. The Goblins of Discord will be doing another study group / fresh typing panel of a chestnut typing panel. And tonight we are going to pick apart the 2 panel.
Could be interesting.
It should be interesting. Okay, everybody prepare for the beautiful intro music. Sadly, it's not the rap. We were trying to find the rap again. If anybody can find the rap of the first few episodes of her podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. Stuck in my head, but yeah.
Yeah, same. I can sing it though.
So welcome to the type 2 panel. This is the best type. It's my.
That was okay. That was already cheeky between the 2 dudes.
Type. Just kidding. No, of course, that's what pride would say. And pride is a central feature of Enneagram type 2, which is a little bit of a tricky concept that hopefully we'll get our arms at least partway around today.
Hopefully.
So type 2 is the first type in the heart triad that we'll look at today. Type 2, the heart triad is the 3 types that are centered in the heart center. So as you know, we all have 3 centers of intelligence, all of us, but our type determines which of the 3 centers we kind of live from more, come from more, that we're sort of out of balance and sort of overemphasizing the presence of one way of interacting with the world, whether it's through action and gut knowing and instinctual behavior from the gut center, through emotion, relationships, empathy from the heart center, or through the head center, types 5, 6, and 7, which are based in thinking and cognition. So today we talk about our heart types that are based in the heart that come more from emotion than the other 2 centers, although sometimes it's kind of tricky to understand what center you come from. For instance, 1s sometimes can be typed as sort of head centers. They tend to be very intellectual, and yet they're body-based centers. So it can be a little bit tricky to self-diagnose what center.
I wonder where she takes that from, that 1s are supposedly often intellectual, because how can that be the case for a structurally head last type? Not that being head last makes you more dumb than other types.
I think it has to do with being like competency types, so they like want to be objective.
Yeah.
So it's like even though they get like their body intuitions, but then they like try and like frame it through a rational.
Yeah, that's the issue of 1s. 1s perceive themselves as more detached than they actually are. But they are not, because the thoughts aren't really integrated into the
so they can experience themselves as cerebral or intellectual because they want to see themselves as being very objective and rational.
But in a way they are even, but yeah, it's just
I think it's mainly because of the inner critic of 1, like constant inner criticism. At the same time, it doesn't really translate to them being intellectual. Being self-critical doesn't really mean going on head type existential ramble or something like that.
No, but maybe for them it could feel that way because they are like over analyzing the situation.
Well, they aren't over analyzing. I mean, that's the one structure. They are not over analyzing. They're feeling into their doing. So and the analyzing, if it takes place later, like with a delay. And that's how superego types function. Their feelings and their body-centered actions justify each other.
Yeah,
okay.
I think I've heard, I think I've seen like once like explain something like this before, that they get their like body intuitions which aren't really rational, but they then they want to, because they want to be like so they then try and like after getting that intuition, they then try to like make it into something rational.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was, yeah.
Because they don't want to like see their judgments as just purely being an emotional thing.
Yeah.
Because
So it has to be like, yeah, it has to be like rationalized. So it's like better to explain to other people to get their like points across or something. I think it's like modeled a little bit. Yeah.
Laying the groundwork for the one panel here.
You live in. But 2s, 3s, and 4s generally come more from emotion in ways they see sometimes, and also in ways they don't see. And they're also associated with the core emotion of sadness or grief at loss. The head types are associated with fear as kind of a central factor that shapes their character. The body types 8, 9, and 1 are associated with anger, and they each act out anger in a different way. The 2, 3, and 4s, they're based in sadness. And where that sadness sometimes comes from is the heart types, all 3 heart types, sometimes get in a message that they're not loved for who they really are in childhood. They get a message that they're loved for what they do, or how they look, or what they do for other people, or whether they perform well. So the 3 heart types have in common this sense of kind of creating an image. And 2s and 3s are shapeshifters, and that they create an image that's designed to get approval or liking or love or affection from others. 2s, 3s.
The shape-shifting 2s. We don't even have to comment on that one.
Whereas do that in 3 different ways. 2s focus on being liked, on gaining the approval of others, on pleasing people as a way of getting their needs met. 2s in childhood often had a sense that they often had an experience of not getting their needs met. Parental figures, caretakers weren't really there, didn't really fulfill their needs. And so unconsciously, 2s take on this idea that there's something wrong with my needs. And they tend to go unconscious to their needs because it's a big source of pain to have a need and have it not get taken care of. So they tend to go into taking care of others as an indirect way of getting others to take care of them. Sometimes this can be through charming people or seducing people. Sometimes it can be through helping and giving. And I personally, as a 2 myself, think that the helping and giving associated with 2 has been a little bit overemphasized. I definitely think that we tend to be supportive people. Very much in the foreground of our attention is what other people need, how we can be useful, how we can be supportive to others. But really, it's important to know that when we offer help, it's strategic help, right? It's very important because sometimes 2s can be seen as just being the sort of, in a kind of a simplistic way, helping others, giving others. And sometimes people don't see the dark side of 2, or they don't see the complicated nature of 2s. That when they give and support, it's often a means to an end. And sometimes the 2 themselves is very unconscious about that. They may just think, well, I'm just being nice, or I just feel supportive of others, or I feel generous in a good way. And certainly 2s can be very altruistic and very generous in a very sincere way. But oftentimes, again, in a way that's even can be not seen by the 2 themselves, they can sort of give to get, or they can lavish praise on someone, hoping that person will see them in a positive light.
That's not too bad, actually. That she's commenting on the transactionality of 2 and rejection. I expected worse. Just if we want to visually type these 5 people, how would you type them? So far, I think the candidate to her right has the highest potential of A2 fix in what I saw from him so far. He seemed like a positive type, and
I think the middle one, the middle lady, it gives strong favorite Karen energy, 136 kind of. It's just the hair. I think she might be head first. I can see a 613 for her.
Interesting.
I think this lady looks like a 6 as well. She looks feisty, like she looks alert sitting there.
Reactive, yeah. And the guy with
he has the most effusiveness of the types so far.
I think the guy, like the second guy from the right, he might be a 9.
He looks 3 fixed also. He's very symmetrical, well built. He has a very sportive and
polished.
Polished in a neutral or toned down way, kind of clothing, and yeah. Oh, there's Thomas.
Can do things for others, hoping that when they're in need, people will do things for them without having to ask. Because more than anything, 2s fear rejection, because relationships and connecting with people, creating positive rapport is so central.
Yeah, I think that part is framed from her likely being a 6 core over a 2 core. I haven't really undertaken the effort to type her. But fear of rejection isn't really what drives 2s. Fear of rejection is more, the way I understand what you just said, sounds more like a fear of losing support, which is 6. 2s, like all rejection types, pre-reject a lot. So if it's more likely for you to be rejected by a rejection type than the rejection type fearing rejection, because the rejection types won't even allow for a relationship if in most of the cases, and especially 2s need to be very selective, because 2s want to be special, or they want to make you feel special through their special help. And if they would just help anybody, their help wouldn't be special, and neither would they.
I think rejection is a bad word for 2. I think it's more about being unacknowledged, being just given it all, but receiving nothing in return. Like rejection is not really hitting the term. Yeah,
rejection is, rejection is the underlying object relational stance, but what you said was good because it gets at the pride into fear of not being appreciated.
And so when things threaten that, that can be hard. And because of all that, 2s have this sort of unconscious need to walk around with a positive view of themselves, so that they can make connections with others, and so that they can feel confident in forming those all-important relationships that are really key and at the center of their focus. And sometimes what happens is that the 2 can almost feel like they need to be superhuman to take care of everyone's needs, to be supportive of everyone. But this is pride. And pride can be a little bit hard to understand in the Enneagram sense, partly because it's synonymous with a good thing. Like it's good to be proud of yourself, to feel good about yourself. But this is pride in a slightly different sense. It's pride is in Dante's sense, as in the lowest pit of hell, is where the Satan who committed the sin of pride lives, right? So it's sort of pride in that sense, and not just the pride and I feel good about myself sense. And what does that mean? It simply means that sometimes there's a way that twos, and again, often in a very unconscious way, can present themselves as something they're not, or because they, on some level, believe they need to be bigger than they are. They need to be more powerful. And simply put, pride is a desire for importance. It's a kind of need to see yourself as important in the lives of others, in the world, so that you can attract other people, so that you can engineer relationships and things like that. So I don't want to say too much more because I want to let the twos talk about how this plays out for them in their life. But that's hopefully an introduction to two. And I may add in a little bit more here and there since this is my type, but for the most part, I want to hear from our really excellent two panel. I want to thank you all for being here today. We have Randy, Michael, Kathy, Jerry, and Deborah on our panel today. And I believe they're even sitting in the order of subtypes. So we'll talk about subtypes a little bit later on in the panel. So Randy, can we talk with you and start off a little bit? Can you say a little bit about how you discovered you were two, what your experience has been being a two? What's the main focus of attention?
That's a lot of questions.
That is
I think I got, well, let me take a wag at it. Yeah. Is that I was going through, it's funny, it's just listening to you, it feels like you're playing my piano. And I get really vulnerable just listening to what you're saying. So, because it's so accurate.
Okay, I think he's too fixed at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I started studying the Enneagram like 9 years ago. And what happened was I was at work. I took on a new job that was much more challenging. And I had a boss that I really liked, this person I really, really liked. But as soon as I started working, she was a good friend of mine for years. And then as soon as I started working for her, she kind of changed into this beast, you know? And so I was complaining to this friend of mine and just saying, I think I'm going to have to quit my job. I had been at the job at the University of California for like 24 years. And I thought, wow, my career is just going to go down the tubes. And so she hooked me up with an Enneagram teacher she used to study with Helen. And I started, she gave me the types to read, and it just resonated with me because of the people aspect and the giving aspect. And I've always been emotional. You know, my mom used to say, we were at a funeral one time, I was 17 years old, and a good friend of mine died. And so I'm crying, and she goes, men don't cry. And I kept saying to her, I go, you know, it's my party. Just leave me alone. You know, my mom was like, oh my God.
What are you guys getting so far?
Well, maybe, I don't know, man. He has like a lot of emotions though. Maybe 9 and 6 with 2.
Yeah.
I don't think he is positive about, like, I don't think there's like a high focus on like all these sad parts, all of the emotional expression, the graveyard, like the death story. I think he might be a 6. He might be a 6 and 2. That's what I feel like.
Yeah, 6 too.
Yeah, I'm not set on core, but I'm thinking 2, 6, 9 Venus flytrap trifix combination as well. I'm not against positive core. I think if he's social dom, which I believe is likely. Yes, sorry, what did you want to say, Maxime?
I wanted to say that what he was talking about finding an Enneagram teacher and trying to, like, this people aspect it feels more, it feels less to me like I want to give it to all y'all. It gives more attachment. Like I want to feel secure. I want to get this identity and be validated for all of these parts because I'm so feminine and daddy didn't like me. Like, that's what it gives me.
Yeah, so the Enneagram of finding his type gave him permission to be the person that he is, which is sort of like attaching to an external authority.
Yeah, but if he has like 6 and 9, then of course the attachment is bigger than so.
Yeah,
I was just thinking Beatrice Chestnut also types as a 2, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm thinking if you're comparing the two of them, like she's like being like sympathetic and like putting her hand on his arm and stuff and being like, yeah, like very like, but he's like pouring out so much more emotion than she is. Like facially, she looks more restrained than he does, so I find that interesting.
Yeah, I also think he's more emotional, or he comes across as more effusive. I think she's SPSO and he is he could be a social type, which if he's not a 2 could also make him identify with the heart center and image and the relational aspect of heart types more. And regardless, even if both of these guys, even if Bea and Randy are both 692, if he's social, he will feel more fluid or imagey than she does.
You're at a funeral and you can't even cry. Jesus, help me, you know? And so it was just always emotional, always feeling things and the doing for others. It was just like, I just constantly worked, even though it was exhausting. So that's kind of, so just reading all the types, 2 was kind of nailed it for me. And I'm a 2.
Can I ask you how constantly?
Yeah, the constant work definitely speaks for superego core. So that could be both 6 and 2. I mean, not that 9s don't like to keep themselves busy, but there's a duty behind his words.
Yeah.
Working was related to being a 2, because I think sometimes people who work a lot get kind of labeled as 3s, as if 2s can't also be really hard workers.
Yeah.
Can you say what motivated you in working a lot?
Well, it was as simple as I knew that was my access to being with my parents. My parents, there were 8 of us in the family, so you know. And my mother always said, "This is terrible." My father had his own things, but my mom, this is kind of the central figure in my life. And she used to say, "Love you best," and you know, and "Could you vacuum, please?" And you know, "Could you do this?" And "The house is a mess. Can you clean up?" So, and my father was, you know, he was more of a 7 joker, you know, so he'd always used to joke about it. But there was always this working with him, you know, handing him tools. He was a kind of maintenance guy, so I would always help him and go out with him and help him do work. So like I was kind of the worker. I mean, I'm now retired, and so I looked at my Social Security, you know, and it says I started working when I was like 13 years old, you know, so it was like work.
And it sounds like for you, work was connected to connection. Like at first.
Yeah, I was the worker bee. Would be more of a 6 statement in general, but so far I'm still not settled on image versus head core. He doesn't seem particularly heady or nervous to me either. Like he has a watery thing about himself. Anybody else has a guess?
I feel like I'm leaning 6 initially, mainly because I feel like image cores tend to have a thing where they're like framing their story very deliberately. and his feels more just like, oh, well, I've been emotional, and here's how, and here's another thing, and this funeral reminds me of this other thing and my parents. But that's just like an initial impression based on his talking style.
Yeah, that's a good point. He
It's
wasn't
also-
really letting us into his emotional situation. Like image types almost feel like they put out a snow globe and they put you inside. So you have the image in like 3D around you, like they're throwing out a hologram for you to.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think if he was score 2, there would be more, like, he would be hiding that aspect that, like, you know, 2s often actually don't show the aspect that they're not getting what they want from people. It's more image covered. Whereas with him, it's very spilly. It's more like, I just mainly get less image and much more head from this.
Yeah, it's a bit like he's collecting data points for his 2-ness. Like, this is a thing, and this is what I did for my mother, and then she said this, and my father was, yeah.
It feels kind of like the way he's framing it, like he's kind of been a victim in these situations. You know, like it's just very sad how he wasn't able to express his emotions, you know, and his parents like didn't understand, and that feels a lot more 6 than 2. I don't think 2 tends to frame themselves as a victim in that way, and it like it doesn't seem like he's like, he talks about how he's connecting with people through working, but it's not very clear to me how he, like, what that connection is, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I feel like a 2 would be more like focus in on that more.
Yeah. Good point.
With mom and dad, like there was a way that working sort of gained their approval or helped you connect with them.
Absolutely. And, well, actually to distinguish myself from my brothers and sisters, because they were all there, you know, being very loud, you know, and it was a very, you know, loud, rambunctious family.
So big.
Yeah, there's this, 6s have this underlying belief that they need to prove themselves more as other types. Like 6s are the types that are most likely to decline a promotion at the workspace because they feel like they don't deserve it yet, or they haven't really done enough. And what if they take this job and then they're not good enough, and then everybody's mad. And so 6s sort of need to collect approval points, whereas 2s, who also have an issue with the paternal or daddy function in object relations, their strategy is not, okay, I have to please daddy, let's see what works. Their strategy is to say, fuck you, daddy. I don't need a daddy. Nobody needs a daddy. I can be the mommy, and that's plenty. That's enough. And through this, they reject the paternal or guidance function in themselves, but they also pretend like it doesn't even exist in the world. And for 6s, then they know that there's a daddy, and they're just uncertain whether daddy loves them. So they need to prove it to daddy that they're lovable.
Well, for 6, it's not necessarily about needing to be loved, but it's not so much about needing to be loved so much as finding security. So they're like seeking the approval in order to feel safe or secure.
Yes. Or guided, like oriented. It's a head type, so they seek orientation. And as all primary types, they also outsource their center or their center desires. And for 6s or all head types, that is orientation in the world. And the primary head type outsources this, which makes them less connected to their own position and orientation in the world and structure.
Crazies. Yeah.
So helpful was how you distinguished yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I did it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michael.
Okay, Randy, you went off quickly. Yeah, so Randy, I would say 6-wing-7 social dom with 9-wing-1 and 2-wing-3 fixes based on this short excerpt.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. And also, I feel like he had so much vulnerability with him. He could have had the narrative, like the daddy narrative that, like, you know, he wanted to get something back, but he never got it. That wasn't the narrative. The narrative was, I'm trying to prove people that I'm a good boy and I'm worthy in the social realm, and I'm a good person who helps people. Like, it was less self-centered and more sex attachment.
So
can you say a little bit about how you discovered you were 2 and how you relate to the 2 personality type?
Well, I relate to what you said about, like, kind of as you're describing the 2 and sitting in view of all of you, I felt the vulnerability of what's underneath the pride.
Yeah.
And my story of how I discovered myself as a 2, I think it's from my perspective, a good kind of testimonial for, in my experience, the helpfulness of the Naranjo-inspired understanding of the subtypes. I study the Enneagram very deeply with Russ and Don at the Enneagram Institute for.
He's 3 fixed, I think. Yeah. There have already been some competency flexes. Like, I've studied the Enneagram very deeply. I get body type vibes.
He seems really nine-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's good. He's very grounded. Also glimpses over stuff. The previous guy was much more particular. Like, this feels like a blunt weapon. The previous one was like a surgical knife, kind of. He just glimpsed across a couple things like they weren't actually important, you know?
Well, I think if he's a 9, he's just circling in. So you need to give a 9 time, and they're just circling around until they reach the center and just witness this beautiful spiral.
Years and went through the whole training. And I always saw myself as a 9.
Yeah.
Not because they told me, that another coaching instructor kind of leaned that way toward me. And
that's bitter, eh? He studied intensively with Russ and he thought he was a 9. Should have stuck with your original teachers.
I think if he's a 9, he's a 9-1-8. There's like double bluntness kind of in it. Like, and 9-1-8s, like, they don't necessarily box their 9-ness. 9-wing-1s, it's like more particular. 9-wing-8s is like, I can be as 9 as fuck as I want to. And we'll see.
Well, I don't think he's
much
super
bluntness.
Yeah, I don't find him as blunt too. But I sense a heaviness. I agree with that. That could indicate 9-wing-8 or SP-DOM, SPSO, very likely. That's also what his clothing style indicates. Oh, it's not a turtleneck, is it? No, it's not.
thing that kind of hooked me onto 9 was the relationship to anger and repression of anger. And like, I saw that about myself and then kind of like just constellated the whole 9 around myself. So as a coach and in a way, an Enneagram teacher, I have a lot of.
Yeah, as a coach and in a way, Enneagram teacher. Not to trash 3s, but they do this. They do these subtle, and it's not even a flex, but they list their achievements, or they list their qualifications, they list their points of value. threes and three fixes. So he's valuable. He's valuable to be in this conversation, and he's done his research. So I'm thinking 9, 3, 6 so far.
Yeah, I was gonna say he feels very like triple adaptive.
Yeah, he's also he feels symmetrical or well-rounded in comparison to Randy, where's something off. Like there's the odd hexy fix that is sticking out like this sore thumb in the holy symmetry of the three primary types.
Yeah, or he has something more like feminine about him, which I guess could be from a number of reasons, but this guy just feels so angular that it just immediately come off as very tree fixed.
Yeah. Reading 2 as coach fix.
Passion for how difficult it can be to see oneself and how easy it is to identify with these types and then take them on, even if it's not quite more of what your type is. So I thought I was a 9 for a long time. And then actually that's when I met you. Claudia Naranjo was here to do a SOT retreat 3 years ago. And I was going through the retreat, and he was teaching about Enneagrams in the mornings, and he was teaching about the 9. And he said, who sees themselves as the 9? And I'd already been, he'd already seen me in action for 3 or 4 days. And I said, I'm 9. And he's like, no. No, you're not a 9.
Oh, I love that about Naranjo, that he was calling people out like that. I didn't know that. I thought most of these established Enneagram teachers were just like nodding in agreement and cringing internally.
Well, he's talking about Naranjo. Naranjo, isn't he?
Yeah.
His name. So I do expect that he was probably less so than some other teachers would be, because he does seem like, he was very like
domineering.
Yeah. Or like very like sort of digging into the types, sort of, so he would be more likely to call the people out if he thought they were something.
That's what happens when you go to retreats with Naranjo. Can I just comment how he said it's so easy to take those types on? Like, that's such a triple attachment phrase. It's not even,
yeah. Good.
And also leave it to a 9 to like be told that there's something else and just be like, okay.
Yeah, I can work with that. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
I can bring my mist into that shape.
this, but not a 9. And in that moment for me, I was like, inside, I was like, fuck you. Like, and but it actually launched, and you really helped me through this process, which was very difficult because I had studied myself so deeply through the lens of being a 9, and had one of my biggest spiritual opening during that period, which I interpreted through the lens of being a 9. So looking at other types was terrifying to me, because it was almost as if, I had connected the spiritual experience with the understanding through a certain mechanism of 9.
Yeah, terrifying, because if he had to see all these types through a new lens, then he would again take on their energetical impressions into himself, and it could change him, which is primary type land, and particularly 9, the sensual.
He's telling the story about like an identity crisis, which is super 9 and triple attachment. But I also don't feel that much like the emotional vulnerability that the previous person had, that was just like constantly flowing out. I'm not getting that at all. So yeah, I guess that, you know, comparing having a 2 fix and not, and also being a head type with the 2 fix, where that's sort of being amplified out versus like, you know, a much more reserved expression.
Yeah, gotta be a thick-skinned SP9 here.
I think that's why he's like much less spilly. That's the self-press social. He's very reserved in his emotionality in a way.
I think even being SPSO, but then having a 2 fix come across there, I think there would be a little bit more of a tenderness.
Not a 9, then maybe that wasn't true. That would have what I experienced with me. Things you learned while you were 9, yeah. Right. Yeah, and so it was just and it was hard for me to find myself as a 2. From my experience, having learned the Enneagram through this other school, because I didn't see, you know, what I learned about the 2s was helper, 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 doing things for others all the time, really hard to say no so you can do something for yourself. And I was like, screw that. I say no to a client so I can go to the spa. Like, yes, I take the last piece of chocolate cake at the table and don't even think about my kids.
SP, yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I was looking at coaching in that retreat. It was like, I'm too selfish. I'm too like I was looking at 3, and I see a lot of 3 in me as well. But it was really
that's such a good example of a 9 being perfectly able to identify themselves as long as no other people just talk over them and tell them what they are and what they should feel. And because if he's on his own, if he doesn't have to include all these other opinions, then he can locate himself and where he's actually at. And
that's so true. What a shame.
Yeah, it's actually reverse growing. It's sad.
This is 3, but I realized I'm an image type, but I don't get fed through accomplishing. Even though I help people with productivity, people say, "Oh, you must be a 3." I do that because I needed help. I dropped balls all the time. I didn't finish things.
Yeah, that is the unspoken contract of 9. I do this for you. I won't tell you that I expect you to do the same for me, but let's be real, I expect you to do the same for me. If everybody in the world would hold this space that I'm holding for you in the same way, then no boundary would ever be crossed, and everybody could have autonomy and peace. And yeah, that's also the psychological merging that 9 does again.
But
like yeah.
But isn't he talking about how he how he isn't doing things for others, or like he doesn't do?
Yeah, but he just said
he isn't very committed to doing things.
He just said his motivation lies in the fact that he himself needs help too. So he does this for others because he knows how it feels to need help.
I feel like that's an interesting, that's a good example of a 9 with 3 versus like a 3 with 9. There's this sort of rationalization of being in the spotlight and being the authority, maybe also with 6, of like I'm a teacher of this thing because I know what it's like to need help with this, so I'm going to help you in the way that I needed help to. So versus like a 3, I don't think would maybe need that kind of rationalization as much to be in that role.
Yeah.
Got taught, and then I teach people what I learned. So yeah, that was the path toward 2, and this, you know, finding the description of the self-pres 2 and the the desire for connection, but the ambivalence about connection makes so much sense to me. I see a lot of one-to-one or sexual in myself too. I'm probably pretty high sexual. So there's
you're probably pretty low.
An assertiveness and confidence and a seduction sexually sometimes that comes out, but I see in myself I don't know, so much about the two.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things about when we met and my sense of you also.
Yeah, we're solid on SPSO for him. I think there are no other guesses.
Yeah, look at his shoes. Are those hiking boots?
Yes, those are definitely trekking shoes. Yes.
Okay.
Those look like something you would buy at Jack Wolfskin stores.
I wondered if you were an image type when I met you, and that was the retreat at which you changed from a 9 to a 2. And by the way, I give you a lot of credit because it's hard to relate to one type for a while and then totally reassess. And I give you a lot of credit for the way you did that. But my sense of you when I met you is almost something that felt like me, and almost an awareness of how people are feeling about you.
Oh my God, yes, thank you for saying that. I was going to say that because as I was sitting back there imagining myself up here, I was feeling the fear of, wait, maybe they're going to see something. Maybe they're going to see that I'm not a 2 and I don't even know that I'm not a 2.
Yeah.
This 9 plugged into the universe. Like, no, it's so funny.
I would just say how those two are really attachment, and he just started matching her energy immediately.
Yes.
And like, it's just so funny. And they're both talking about an existential crisis of how difficult it is to not be a type and then attach myself to something else and become something else. It's just like, what are we even doing?
Yeah, they're relating. They're relating intuitively towards their attachment perspectives.
Yeah.
What type do you think Beatrice is?
Probably 6.
Yeah, we started, I think, under the impression that she is a 6. We will probably have her typed after doing all these 9 panels.
She does seem a lot like pushier than he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe more,
which could be het.
Yeah.
What was that, Shanti?
Also, maybe more super ego, I thought.
Yeah. Because he's a 9 and she's a super ego type.
Yeah.
In any case. Yeah. I don't think Bea does trifix.
No.
Yeah.
Seriously, and that's I see that in my life a lot, and in my spiritual work, where I may be sitting with my spiritual teacher doing a deep inquiry, and I may have an instance of, wait, what do you see? Because only if you see it is my experience valid.
Yeah.
Do I exist in the state that I'm existing?
We're touching on a few really important things about 2. One.
Yeah, very important things about 2. Only if you see it, it's valid.
It's the 9est thing. This is like my experience. Come on, dude.
It's just so bad. It's just like mass delusion. I don't know how she's like even letting this go through.
I guess she just has such a different definition of 2. Maybe I didn't really hear the beginning, but
yeah, they just have like her own system, and in her system this tracks, so
I think it's not like, I think she doesn't care. It's just kind of, we're letting this spill and go through, and it's fine.
I think it's fine.
The more often your students retype, the more panels and courses they can visit as well.
Right.
I think it's like based on the idea that, like image types wants to have their image like mirrored in some way. Or like being seen through eyes, or like they're always imagining themselves through the eyes of an audience, sort of.
Yeah, but for the
like basing it off that idea that they then have to have some kind of audience to have in order to like feel like they exist or something.
Can we also mention what a good deep ASMR voice he had in the beginning? Like, it's so deep, goes through you, so sexy, honestly. The second he started talking to her, he started sounding like 6 carpets rolling under her. Like, he immediately changed. It's just
that's weird.
Like he just matched her energy more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Because
good
we're
at that.
shapeshifters, because part of our survival strategy is I'm going to be who you want me to be so we can connect. And so I can feel connected to you and maybe get some of my needs met through you. But definitely there's a way that like I am whoever you want me to be. And so to sort of shift their presentation.
Yeah, that's really bad about twos. To anybody.
They're not adaptive at all, right?
Yes, twos are not adapting types, and twos are not anybody you want them to be. That is, in the heart center, that is, if any type, it's more 3-winged two, but even 3s have their own identity and vision. All image types are very particular and almost pseudo assertive about their image. And they have a very distinct vision, which doesn't change in the eye of the beholder.
Would you say that a 2, like they're trying to convince others, like they'll just insert themselves and like basically force you to think that you wanted them or needed them in the first place to be there? Or like how would you describe that?
Well, 2 is rejecting the gaze of the image center or the view on the 2 itself. It's like a mirror, a reflection. So you can't really penetrate the 2, as you cannot really penetrate all rejection types. So what they're doing, they're acting as a function. So you see the image of the transaction or of the helpfulness in the particular fashion that the 2 embodies for you specifically. And what's often hard with 2s is to get at the underbelly of their emotions, and especially the negative aspects of their self-image. Because there's also the rejection happening, and in the case of 2, as having the positive, being on the positive spectrum in the image center, they reject the negative side, which is 4. And for 4, it's the reverse, of course. So you can picture image as like this mirror or this angle of positive and negative, and 3 is neutral in the middle. And I just realized that I terribly digressed. But
no, that I really like that explanation about it's like what they're doing instead of like who they are. That would it's kind of a weird way for me to think about image, because to me, I mean, also being like, maybe that's my stacking, and also being like a triple adaptive type. I think of people having sort of personas and like who people are as, I don't know, there's like some essential quality of people, and I try to like, it's like I have a mental map of what of like who a person is, you know, in my head, and I'll like continually adjust that as I get more information about people. I'll kind of like, you know, develop this model of who they are in my head. But it seems like a 2, it's not like who they are, it's like these are the way, like their functions, like you said. And that is who they are, that is everything. It's just the functions, what they've done, what they're doing for people.
I think it's kind of dehumanizing to, you know, to call them a function, but I do believe that there's a particular difference between 9 and 2s. 9 adapt, whereas 2s know what they have to do to get what they want. So there is a function there, whereas 9s adjust themselves to suggest what they do while remaining stable.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think it's dehumanizing to get back to that, to call rejection types sort of I've called them one-dimensional, because really a relationship with a rejection type is happening over their offering. So for 5s, that is a mental offering, and for 8s, that is an offering in the experience of the body center. And